Hi, I'm Arabella, a storyteller on YouTube. This story is inspired by real relationship confessions and has been fictionalized for storytelling purposes. Names, details, and events have been changed. If this story moves you, or if you see a part of yourself in it, please like the video and subscribe to support my channel. Now, let's begin. I wasn't exposed by a text message. I was exposed by my son's college tuition letter. He was sitting across from me, smiling, talking about dorms, scholarships, and the life he thought we had all built honestly. My husband didn't smile. He kept staring at the payment form at the account we had saved for 18 years. Then he looked at me and asked, "Before I pay for his future, is there anything you should have told me about his past? Before I became the woman who destroyed her own family, I truly believed I was a good wife." And that is the part I hate admitting the most. Because when people hear what I did, they imagine a cold woman, someone selfish from the beginning, someone who woke up every morning knowing she was living inside a lie and simply didn't care. But I cared. At least that is what I told myself. I packed lunches. I remembered birthdays. I ironed my husband's shirts before work when he had important meetings. I knew how he liked his coffee, 2 sugars, no cream. I knew which knee hurt when the weather changed. I reminded him to take his blood pressure pills when he forgot. I was the mother who stayed up making school projects look better than they needed to. I was the woman in the grocery store comparing prices because college was coming one day, even when one day still felt far away. I kept family photos on the fridge, the kind with crooked magnets and sun-faded corners. In those photos, we looked happy. And the terrible thing is, sometimes we were. My son used to run down the hallway and jump into my husband's arms like the world had only one safe place. My husband would catch him every time. He would spin him around, kiss the top of his head, and say, "There's my boy." Every time he said that, something inside me tightened, but I never corrected him. Instead, I cooked dinner. I folded laundry. I sat beside my husband at parent-teacher meetings and smiled when the teacher said our son had his father's patience. I smiled like that sentence didn't cut straight through me. For 18 years, I convinced myself that if I loved them well enough, the lie would become smaller. If I made the house warm enough, if I remembered every appointment, if I never missed a school play, if I became the kind of wife and mother no one could accuse of being careless, then maybe the first thing I did wrong would stop mattering. That was the lie beneath the lie. I wasn't hiding my secret with cruelty. I was hiding it with devotion. And devotion, when it is built on fear, can look almost exactly like love. It started during a time when I felt like I was disappearing inside my own marriage. That is not an excuse. I need to say that before I say anything else. My husband did not deserve what I did to him. He may have been tired. He may have been distant. He may have come home late, eaten dinner quietly, and fallen asleep before I finished telling him about my day. But none of that gave me permission to betray him. Still, that was the soil where I planted the first lie. Back then, our marriage was not broken in a dramatic way. There were no screaming fights, no slammed doors, no threats to leave, nothing anyone outside our house would have noticed. It was quieter than that. It was two people sitting on the same couch watching the same television, feeling miles apart. It was me asking, "How was work?" and him saying, "Same as always." It was him asking, "What's for dinner?" before he asked how I was. It was me, lying in bed beside him, listening to him breathe, wondering when I had become part of the furniture. Then I met him, not in some romantic movie-like way, not under rain, not across a crowded room, not with music swelling in the background. He was just someone who listened. That was the dangerous part. He noticed when I changed my hair. He remembered small things I said. He asked follow-up questions. When I talked, he did not look over my shoulder or check the time. He looked at me like I was still someone worth studying. At first, I told myself I was just grateful. Then I told myself I was just lonely. Then I told myself that being understood was not the same thing as being unfaithful. That sentence became my hiding place, because the affair did not begin with a kiss. It began with the relief of being seen. And once I started craving that feeling, I began comparing it to everything I felt I was missing at home. I stopped asking why my husband was tired. I stopped wondering whether he felt lonely too. I only saw my own emptiness and I used it like evidence. I told myself he understands me better. But the truth was that man only saw the parts of me I chose to show him. My husband had lived with all of me, the tired version, the impatient version, the woman with bills on the counter and laundry in the hallway. The first lie was not about him. It was about me believing I was still in control. I told myself I could draw a line whenever I wanted. I told myself I knew where the edge was. I told myself that as long as nothing physical happened, I was still a faithful wife who had simply found someone easy to talk to. But I knew I was lying. Because faithful wives do not delete harmless messages. Faithful wives do not turn their phones face down when their husbands walk into the room. Faithful wives do not smile at a screen, then pretend they are smiling at something on television. The first time he texted me late at night, I should have ignored it. Instead, I waited until my husband was asleep. I remember lying there in the dark, the room quiet except for the sound of his breathing. My phone lit up against the bedsheet and I picked it up slowly, like the light itself might wake him. He had written, "Are you still awake?" 3 harmless words. That is what I told myself. I typed back, "Yes," and something changed. Not in the house, not in my marriage, not in the life everyone else could see. It changed in me. Because after that, I started creating 2 versions of myself. One version made breakfast, kissed her husband goodbye, and asked if he would be home for dinner. The other version waited for messages from a man who was not her husband. At first, our conversations stayed careful. Work, books, childhood stories, complaints about ordinary life. Then they became private. Then they became necessary. I began saving little pieces of my day for him. A funny thing someone said. A frustration I didn't want to explain at home. A thought I should have shared with my husband but didn't. And every time I chose him first, I moved the line. When we met for coffee, I called it innocent. When I wore the blouse he once said looked nice on me, I called it coincidence. When I lied to my husband and said I was meeting a friend, I called it avoiding a misunderstanding. But I was not avoiding a misunderstanding. I was creating one. The first time he touched my hand across the table, I did not pull away. I remember looking at our hands like they belonged to 2 other people, like I was watching a scene I could still stop before it became real, but I did not stop it. Afterward, I drove home with my wedding ring pressing into my finger so hard it felt like a warning. My husband was in the kitchen when I walked in. He asked, "Good day," I said, "Just normal." That was the first lie that sounded easy. A few weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. And for 1 full minute, before joy, before fear, before anything else, I counted dates. That was when the affair stopped being a secret between 2 adults. That was when my lie reached forward and touched a child who had not even been born yet. I could have told the truth then. I should have. Instead, I looked at my husband holding the pregnancy test with tears in his eyes, and I let him believe the happiest moment of his life belonged completely to him. From that second on, I was not just hiding what I had done. I was building a life where everyone else would have to live inside my silence. I watched my husband love my son, and every time he did, I told myself that telling the truth would be the cruel thing. That was how I survived 18 years. Not by forgetting. I never forgot. I remembered in small, awful flashes. The first time my husband held him in the hospital, he cried harder than I did. He kept whispering, "He's perfect." Like the baby had arrived to fix something in him he never knew was broken. I should have told him then. But my son's fingers were wrapped around his thumb, and my husband looked so full of love that I convinced myself the truth would only destroy what was beautiful. So I stayed quiet. Then our son took his first steps across the living room from me to him. My husband dropped to his knees, arms open, laughing like he had won something, when our son fell into his chest. My husband kissed his forehead and said, "That's my boy." I stood there smiling. My mouth knew what shape to make. My heart knew better. Years passed and the lie learned how to live with us. It sat at the breakfast table while my husband cut pancakes into small pieces. It rode in the back seat when he drove our son to soccer practice. It stood beside us at school plays, birthday parties, parent-teacher meetings, and every Father's Day breakfast where my son handed him a card covered in crooked letters. Best dad in the world. I read those words once while cleaning the kitchen and I had to sit down. Not because they were false, because they were true. That was the cruelest part. My husband was his father in every way that mattered day to day. He was the one who stayed up during fevers. He was the one who taught him how to ride a bike. He was the one who pretended not to be scared when our son got his learner's permit and nearly hit the mailbox. And every memory they made gave me one more reason not to confess. I told myself he's too young. Then, this would ruin his childhood. Then, my husband is under too much stress. Then, we are finally happy. There was always a reason. But a reason can become a hiding place if you repeat it long enough. I did not keep the secret because I was brave. I kept it because I was afraid. Afraid of losing my husband. Afraid of my son looking at me differently. Afraid that the life I had carefully built would collapse the moment I let the truth breathe. So I became a better wife. Or at least, I tried to look like one. I made the house warm. I remembered everything. I loved harder cooked, better apologized, faster, smiled, longer. I thought devotion could pay off a moral debt. But love cannot erase a lie when the lie is holding the whole family together. The acceptance letter came on a Tuesday morning. My son found the email before I even finished making coffee. I heard him shout from upstairs, then the sound of his feet running down the hall, and for one beautiful second, I forgot everything. He came into the kitchen holding his laptop like it was something holy. "I got in," he said. My husband stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. He hugged him first. I remember that. I remember standing by the counter watching the two of them hold each other and thinking, maybe this is what mercy looks like. Maybe the past can stay buried if the life built on top of it is good enough. That night we ordered takeout. My son talked too fast, jumping from dorm rooms to classes to whether he would need a new laptop. My husband kept smiling at him, but not the way he usually did. There was something careful in his face. After dinner, he brought out the folder. The college folder. 18 years of savings forms, tax documents, insurance records, scholarship papers. Everything we had collected for the moment we were supposed to be proudest. My son was still at the table, scrolling through the student portal, reading every page like his future was opening one door at a time. Then my husband stopped turning pages. Just stopped. His hand rested on one form and his thumb pressed into the paper until it bent. I asked, "What is it?" He didn't answer right away. He looked at the medical section, then at an old insurance document, then back at the form again. It was such a small thing, a line of information, a detail no one would ever notice unless they were forced to gather every document in one place. It wasn't enough to prove anything by itself, but it was enough to wake up a question that had apparently been sleeping inside him longer than I knew. He looked at me across the table. Not angry. Not yet. Just still. Too still. He asked, "When did you first know?" My son looked up from his laptop. What my husband didn't look at him. He kept looking at me. I tried to speak, but my mouth had forgotten how to be useful. He tapped the paper once. "Don't explain the form," he said. "Explain your face." That was when I understood. It wasn't the paperwork that betrayed me. It was the way I reacted to it. For 18 years, I had practiced being a wife, a mother, a normal woman in a normal house. But I had never practiced this moment. I had never practiced what my face would do when the truth finally entered the room and sat down with us. My husband did not ask me who the man was. He did not ask where we met, how long it lasted, or whether I loved him. Those were the questions I had prepared for years. In the darkest corner of my mind, I had imagined this moment. I imagined him shouting. I imagined him calling me names. I imagined myself crying, begging, trying to explain how lonely I had been, how confused, how young, how stupid. I had built entire speeches for the wrong trial, because the first thing he asked was, "Does he know I looked at our son?" He was still sitting at the table, one hand on his laptop, the other on the edge of the chair. He looked between us like he had just walked into a conversation in a language he almost understood. Know what he asked? My husband closed the folder slowly. That sound, paper sliding against paper, was somehow worse than yelling. He stood up, but he did not move toward me. He looked like a man trying to decide whether the floor under him was real. Then he said quieter this time, "Does our son know?" Our son. He still said our. That one word nearly broke me. I shook my head. My husband nodded once, but it did not look like relief. It looked like another wound opening. "So I'm the last one," he said. "No," I whispered. But it sounded pathetic even to me, because in one way he was right. He had been the last person allowed to understand his own life. Every birthday candle he lit, every baseball glove he bought, every school form he signed as father. Every late-night drive to the emergency room, every time someone said, "He looks like you," and he smiled. All of it had been placed in his hands by me, not as a gift, as a lie. He looked down at the folder again. "I don't know what I am right now," he said. "I don't know if I'm his father or your victim, or just the man you needed to keep quiet for 18 years. I wanted to say, you are his father, but I no longer had the right to define that for him." Then my son stood up. The chair legs scraped against the floor, sharp and sudden. He looked at me first. Not at my husband. At me. And his voice was smaller than I had ever heard it. I wanted to say sorry to my son, but for the first time in his life, I did not know what I was allowed to call him. My baby. My boy. My son. Every word felt like something I had stolen before I understood the cost. He stood in the kitchen doorway, no longer smiling about college, no longer talking about dorms, no longer asking whether he could take the old car with him. He looked 18 and 8 years old at the same time. Old enough to understand betrayal, young enough to still need it not to be true. "Mom," he said, "what is he talking about?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. My husband sat down slowly, like his body had finally become too heavy to hold. He kept one hand on the folder, but he was not looking at the papers anymore. He was looking at the boy he had raised. And I knew, in that exact second, that I had not just lied to my husband. I had forced both of them to love each other inside a story I had edited. My son looked from him to me. "Is Dad my dad?" There it was. 5 words. No screaming, no accusation, no dramatic speech. Just the question I had spent 18 years avoiding. I said his name. He flinched. That hurt more than if he had yelled. "Answer me," he said. My husband closed his eyes. I could hear the refrigerator humming. I could hear a car passing outside. I could hear the smallest sounds in the room because none of us knew how to breathe normally anymore. "I don't know," I said. My son stared at me. "You don't know." I shook my head, and the movement felt too small for the damage it carried. "You never knew?" he asked. I wanted to say it was complicated. I wanted to say I was scared. I wanted to say I loved him from the moment I knew he existed, and that part was true. But truth, when it arrives, 18 years late, does not sound noble. It sounds like another excuse. He stepped back from me. Not far. Just one step. But it felt like a door closing. "Does he know?" he asked. I knew who he meant. The other man. The man whose name I had not spoken in our house for almost 2 decades, even though his shadow had lived there longer than some of our furniture. "No," I said. My son laughed once. Not because anything was funny, because sometimes the body reaches for the wrong sound when there is too much pain. "So he doesn't know," he said. Dad didn't know. I didn't know. Everybody's life got decided by you, and you just kept going. I had no answer that did not make me worse. He looked around the kitchen at the takeout containers, at the college papers, at the family calendar on the wall, where I had written orientation weekend in blue marker. Then he asked the question that finally broke whatever was left of me. If I hadn't gotten in, would you ever have told us I wanted to lie? That instinct was still there, ugly and alive. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say of course. I wanted to say I had been waiting for the right time. But the right time had come and gone 1,000 times. When he was born. When he called my husband Dad. When he asked where babies came from. When he made a Father's Day card. When he turned 16. When he started applying to schools. Every year I had chosen silence. So I said nothing. And my silence answered for me. Our marriage did not end in a fight. It ended with 3 envelopes on the kitchen table. One held the papers my husband had printed from the college portal. Tuition, housing, meal plans, deadlines. All the things we had been saving for since our son was a baby. One held the test information he ordered the next morning after spending the night on the couch without sleeping. And one arrived 2 weeks later from a lawyer. That was the envelope I stared at the longest. Not because I was surprised, because part of me still thought the end would look louder. I thought there would be shouting, broken dishes, doors slammed so hard the walls shook. I thought my husband would demand every detail and make me repeat the worst parts until there was nothing left of me to hide behind. But he did not do that. He became practical. That was worse. He moved through the house like a man closing accounts. He changed passwords. He separated statements. He slept in the guest room. He took his wedding ring off and placed it in the small dish by the front door. The same dish where we used to drop keys and loose change. No speech, no warning, just metal touching ceramic. My son stopped calling me Mom for a while. He did not call me anything. If he needed to speak to me, he would stand in the doorway and say, "Can you pass me that or I'm going out?" Never my name. Never Mom. The first time he sent his father a message instead of asking me about dinner, I understood something I had avoided for 18 years. Love does not always disappear. Sometimes it gets rerouted around you. The house became quiet in a way I had never heard before. Not peaceful. Not empty. More like everyone inside it was trying not to touch the same wound. One evening, my husband placed the 3 envelopes on the table and sat across from me. He said, "I don't know what happens with tuition yet." I looked up too fast. He held up his hand. "Not because I don't love him," he said. "Don't you dare make it that simple." I lowered my eyes. He continued, "I love him. That is the problem. I just don't know what part of my life was real, and what part you handed to me because you were too afraid to lose it." I wanted to say he was his father, but fatherhood was no longer a word I could use to comfort him. It had become something he needed to reclaim without me standing in the middle of it. That night, I signed the first set of legal papers at the same table where we used to plan vacations. My son's college letter was still there under the corner of a folder, his future on one side, my past on the other, and me in the middle, finally understanding that when trust dies, love does not always explode. Sometimes it becomes paperwork. I used to think the worst day of my life was the day they found out. It wasn't. The worst day was much earlier than that. It was the day I looked at my husband's face, saw pure joy, and decided he did not deserve the truth because I was too afraid of what the truth would cost me. That was the day I lost myself. Not all at once, not dramatically, piece by piece. I lost myself every time my son said Dad and I smiled like there was no knife under the word. I lost myself every time my husband opened a college savings statement and said, "We're doing this for him," while I knew there was a question buried inside our family that he had never been allowed to ask. I lost myself every time I almost confessed, then found a reason not to. He was too young. My husband was too stressed. The timing was wrong. The house was finally peaceful. The holidays were coming. College applications were hard enough. There was always a reason. And every reason sounded like love until the day it sounded like cowardice. I do not know what will happen between my husband and the boy he raised. I still say my son in my head. I do. But now, every time I say it, I hear the question behind it. Do I have the right? Biology did not tuck him in at night. Biology did not teach him to ride a bike. Biology did not sit beside him during fevers, or clap at school plays, or save money year after year for a future he had not even chosen yet. My husband did that. And I took the cleanest kind of love in our house and I made it stand trial because I was scared. I used to tell myself I was protecting them. But protection does not require another person to live blindfolded. Protection does not steal someone's right to know their own life. So when people ask what I lost, I still do not know how to answer. I lost my husband. Maybe I lost my son. But the first thing I lost was quieter than that. I lost the woman I pretended to be. And maybe that is the question I deserve to live with now. Did I lose my family when the truth came out? Or did I lose them the first time I chose the lie? As Arabella, I think this story reminds us that a lie does not stay in the past, just because time passes. Sometimes, the people we say we are protecting are the ones we hurt the most by hiding the truth. Love built on silence can still feel real, but one day someone will have to pay for that silence. So I'll leave you with this question: is it more painful to discover the truth late, or to realize someone chose your life for you? Thank you for listening to this story with me. If it touched you, please don't forget to like this video and follow the channel for more stories like this. And most importantly, leave a comment below with your thoughts, how this story made you feel, and what you would have done in their place.